Sometimes it isn't rocket science. When you win in the trenches, you can win football games. And if you think that exact same thought, I want you to smash that like button because you are going to love the video I'm putting out today here on the Raiders Report. Coming up today on the Raiders Report, I'm Mitchell Renz, and we're going to be looking at the top 10 NFL free agents that the Raiders could sign in the trenches. I'm talking about the big guys up front, the edge rushers, your defensive ends, your defensive tackles, your offensive guards, offensive tackles. The Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs because they were the more physically dominating and posing team, and watching Kansas City get dominated by Philadelphia reminded me when the Raiders beat the Chiefs back on Christmas, when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. All of those games have one thing in common, that the team that won was winning in the trenches on both sides of the football, and I would love to be able to embarrass Mahomes. I would love to be able to embarrass the Kansas City Chiefs way, way more. So that's why I got my top 10 players I want the Raiders to sign in free agency. Today's show is presented by Panda Sups, and I love Panda Sups because they always hook me up with awesome codes. Code is FKC, and you're going to be able to get 25% off at pandasups.com. Also, if you spend over $100, he's also going to hook you up with a free drawstring bag. On top of that, a free shaker. So you get a gym bag, you get a shaker. Code FKC, 25% off. The owner of Panda Sups also huge Raiders fan, and he was excited how that Super Bowl game ended up going down. So the rankings that you're going to see here on today's show are based on overall skill of the player, the cost of how much it's going to be for the Raiders to go out and sign that player, and then how big of a team need it is for the silver and black. So I'm going to say this. It's going to go from 10, and it's going to work its way down to 1, and the players are, some guys are a lot better than other players that are ranked higher and lower. It just all has to do with what the Raiders have, what the Raiders need to spend, and just overall best bang for your buck. As it stands right now, if you look at Overthecap, Raiders are at 92.5. Spotrac, it's 95.2. It's just based on the way that both of these websites do their overall contracts. The Raiders are going to be aggressive this offseason. When you go out and you hire Pete Carroll, when you go out and you get your number one GM and John Spytek, when you give Patrick Graham a raise, when you make Chip Kelly the highest paid OC in the NFL, the Raiders are going to be aggressive, and they've already said that they're going to be aggressive because this is a team that is in win-now mode. So I'm going to go from 10. I'm going to work my way down to 1, and I'm going to tell you why each guy is a top candidate that the Raiders need to consider in free agency if we're trying to win in the trenches. Let's go to number 10 here on the list, and it is Azeez Ojulari. Ojulari was a player that I talked about in my perfect defensive players to target video for Patrick Graham, and I say that because he's only 24 years old and was drafted by PG back in 2021 when he was a premier edge rusher coming out of Georgia. When he's healthy, this guy can get after the quarterback. I will admit, he's missed 22 games the last 3 seasons, and the games that he's played, though, 22 sacks, 37 quarterback hits in those 30 games. I believe Azeez Ojulari could potentially take a little bit of a cheaper deal than what people think, and I don't know if you're going to be able to get Malcolm Koonce and Ojulari. To me, you're probably going to have to pick at least one of those players. When you look at what Azeez has done over the past 4 years, that year at the very, very bottom, 2021, rookie season with Patrick Graham. And we've seen what Rob Leonard and PG are able to do with some of these young premier edge rushers. I'll tell you this, if they can make K'Lavon Chaisson look the way that they did, every single player that I'm going to talk about on today's show should want to play with Patrick Graham and should want to play with Rob Leonard. Now, also what I'm going to do here, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to tell you what Spotrac and what PFF has the overall value for them. This is going to be the first time Azeez has hit the open market. Spotrac has him valued at 2 years, 15 million, 7.6 mil. PFF has him valued at 1 year, 5 mil. Because Spotrac and PFF have Azeez Ojulari projected to be cheaper than Malcolm Koonce, that's why I put Ojulari in here. If you told me we're going to be able to get Malcolm Koonce for this price tag, I would put Koonce over Azeez. Let's go to number 9 here. Chase Young, defensive end for the New Orleans Saints last season. And quite frankly, when Young was coming out of the draft, this was one of those prospects that people talked about as just being a true generational type of talent coming out of Ohio State. Well, guess what? Remember earlier when I was talking about Caleb on Chase, and if I was Chase Young, I would want to go play with Rob Leonard, and I would want to go play with Patrick Graham. He's only 25 years old, and I do. It would be a great project for Leonard to see what he can do with them. He had a career-high 21 quarterback hits last season for the Saints, and he's played in 33 games the past 2 seasons. The reason why the Washington Football Commanders Redskins moved on from Young early on in his career, it's because he couldn't stay healthy. Talented player, but when you're unable to stay on the field, you don't get as much production then. But when you look at Washington, the Niners, last season with the Saints, he's been able to stay on the field and he's been able to generate pressure. At such a young age, I'm just telling you this right now, if they're able to figure it out, and imagine if Chase Young hits his peak, Tyree Wilson hits his peak, you combine those 2 players with a Christian Wilkins and a Max Crosby, that's fun and exciting. For Chase Young, second time he's hitting the open market, Spotrac has him projected at $17.5 million, but if you notice, 4 years for Spotrac, PFF has him at 2 years. 4 years, I'm not interested in Chase Young. 2 to 3 year deal is kind of how I would look for the young man. Go out there and kind of prove it. But at 17.5, if he's able to put it together at age 26, this is a steal for a player that's this talented as Chase Young. So what I want you guys to do is go down to the comments section and let me know who's one player that the Raiders should add this offseason to help in the trenches. You're about to get hit with a YouTube ad break. I want you to scroll on down and give me your answer. While that answer is down below, appreciate everyone again for always tuning into the Raiders Report. Coming in up here at number 8, it is going to be Milton Williams, defensive tackle of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I have been clamoring for the Raiders to sign Williams and target Williams for multiple years on this show. And I never thought in a million years he was going to make the amount of money that he's going to make this offseason. But this was always an under-the-radar player. He's 26 years old, coming off a great Super Bowl performance up against Kansas City. 67 games played, 19 starts. The reason why I have Williams at number 8 and he's not higher on this list is because what you would have to pay him, projected to make somewhere around $21 million, and for a player that started only 19 games and has played in only 501 snaps, also on top of that, next to Jalen Carter, I'm concerned if Milton Williams loses Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, he's just going to look a little bit more like a normal human being. But the 26-year-old has done some good things, whether that's in 2024 or whether that's in 2023. Last year, again, only had 7 games started, but is able to get after the quarterback, can be a solid run stopper overall, and even you look at his career stats, smaller school dude coming up and out, but has been buried on that depth chart for such a long time because, Fletcher Cox is getting some work in there. Jalen Carter was getting some work in there. Jared Davis, I think it was the other defensive tackle from Georgia, was getting some work in there. This is going to be the first time Williams hits free agency, and to me, he's going to cash in for the Super Bowl game that he had. If there's one player that I do believe is going to get paid a little bit too high because of recency bias, it's going to be Milton Williams, and he's a great player. Like, if the Raiders go out and they get him, I'm not going to be upset. But there's better bang for your buck players out there, which is why I have Williams at number 8. Let's go to number 7. This one might surprise some people because many say this is the top offensive guard in free agency, and I'm going to put Trey Smith at 7 simply because there was another offensive guard that I believe that you could get at a cheaper price that I am more interested in overall. He's played in 67 games with 67 starts. And he's only 25. Being able to steal him also away from Kansas City is great. I'll admit, him only playing right guard in the NFL, not that it makes me nervous, but I would want to keep Dylan Parham over on the right side, and I would like to be able to find somebody that I can put on the left side. Again, not the end of the world where if you told me my starting offensive line was Colton Miller, Dylan Parham, JPJ, Trey Smith, and then DJ Glaze on the right side, that's something that I can at least get behind around a little bit. But again, the amount of money you're going to have to pay Trey, coming off a year we had a 78.8 overall PFF grade. He's good in the run blocking game. He's good in the pass blocking game. Definitely think he's better in the run blocking game. 9 penalties last season. Not a single sack allowed, though. He got worked against Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, and that entire front of Philadelphia in that Super Bowl. But with Smith being a young player and the first time he's hitting the open market, he's going to get paid. And Spotrac and PFF have him somewhere around $19 to $20 million per year. I'll admit, if the Raiders are going to overspend I want them to overspend in the trenches. And I'm okay with them looking at some of these values of some of these players. And again, not being afraid to overspend, because if there's a spot to overspend in the NFL, it's okay to do it when it comes to the trenches. Let's go to number 6, and this one might be a little bit of an eye popper for some, but Poona Ford is a really interesting prospect to me this season for the Raiders, and I say that because of what he was able to do last season and just how much belief I have in Patrick Graham, Rob Leonard, and also Pete Carroll. Ford was PFF's 5th best defensive tackle last season, and realistically, when you think about the best versions of Poona, it was from 2018 to 2022 underneath Pete Carroll with the Seattle Seahawks. Last season on the Chargers, he played in 55% of the snaps, and that's 604 snaps. When you're the Raiders and you know you have so many missing pieces, and we do, we got a lot of missing pieces on both sides of the football. If you wanted to go out and overspend on a Trey Smith, you want to go out and overspend maybe on an edge rusher. We'll talk about some of these other names coming up here in a moment. That also means sooner or later you got to find a really good bang for your buck value player. That's where Poona Ford steps in. Last season, 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 39 tackles. 2023 battled a few injuries. Was only playing in 8 games there in Buffalo. But go back and watch him and how impactful he was in the middle for some of those Seahawks defenses. So this is going to be the 4th time Poona has hit the open market. And if you're telling me right now I'm able to get him somewhere between 3.5 and 6.6, let's just say for my math's sake, $5 million on a 1-year prove-it deal for a 30-year-old Poona Ford, with Rob Leonard and Patrick Graham, that's the value there. And sometimes you got to find value. You can't just say, I want the best players and give them the most money every time. That's not how salary cap works. This isn't the MLB. The Raiders need to find certain players where there's value, and Poona Ford is one of those guys. Before we get in to the top 5, and speaking of value, shout out to today's sponsor, again, Panda Subs. They do have some brand new products, which I want to tell you all about. And again, you almost got to get Panda now, because the code FKC, you got to take advantage of it for 25% off. This link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. Oftentimes, people ask me and Chugs, like, how the heck do we always bounce back the next day after a crazy show? You get some focus, some nootropics in there, whether you're a gamer, maybe you're a student. Sometimes, like, if I have a little bit of a crash at, like, let's say 2, 3 o'clock after I eat or something like that, you take a scoop of the nootropics, you're going to be laser focused in. Also, it's not a secret. I'm getting married, and it's kind of crazy. I'm actually getting married in less than 4 months from now, and I'm trying to lose weight. It's not easy losing weight when you party and do some of the crazy stuff that we do, but I'm not afraid to tell you that I take fat burners, and I take things that help me lose a few LBs from time to time. Panda just released this brand new Burn Max. I'm telling you this for somebody that's used a lot of Panda Subs products. I don't want to say be careful because of how strong this is, but at least try it and take like a quarter of a scoop, take maybe a half of a scoop, see how your body handles it, and then go from there, because this stuff will melt the weight off you. It's actually insane how much weight you will lose by using the Panda Burn here. Also, if you're trying to stay in better shape, Panda Subs Protein is the best protein on the market for taste, in my opinion. I have that late night craving all the time. Take a scoop, you're going to get 30 grams of protein, somewhere between 140, maybe 160 calories overall. Great tasting protein, different types of flavors. Pandasubs.com, code FKC for 25% off. Let's get into the top 5, and I'm going to go with B.J. Hill, defensive tackle for Cincinnati. And he's going to be 30 years old, but it's still a great complementary player. And I use that word because Hill to me is somebody like, imagine a 6th man on a great NBA title roster. The stars of our team are Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins up front. If I'm B.J. Hill, I'm just got to be a distributor. I need B.J. Hill to basically be the Draymond Green to our defensive line. Somebody that's just going to get some rebounds, create some space, but at the end of the day, somebody that's reliable, 112 games played, 67 games started in his career, 3 straight seasons with over 700 snaps played, but because he's good against the run, because he's good against the pass, no matter what situation you put him in, he's going to be good for the Raiders defense. He's going to help Crosby and Wilkins. He would also help a young player out like a Tyree Wilson. B.J. Hill is a really fun player. Also, also, based on what you're going to be able to get him at, again, 30 years old. We have seen NFL defensive tackles make it very, very far in their career. We're going to talk about Calais Campbell coming up here in a little bit. He's 38 years old, and he's still playing at an unbelievably high level. These big body guys in the middle are able to just continue to go out there and do their thing. So whether it's 2 years, $18 million, or 2 years at 20 and a half, getting a player of B.J. Hill's caliber, and you could even consider to give him a, again, 2 to 3 year deal. I love that with Pete Carroll at that value. That's the type of value that we need. Let's go to number 4 here on my list. You guys can call him Ziggy. His name is Osa Odighizuwa, defensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. And y'all know, I love a player that gets better and better and better and better. Also, you can also talk about his connection with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was a big-time recruiter, recruited him to go to UCLA, and I get it, Osu plays defense, but we talk about continuity. We talk about being able to create something for the long haul. You can call me crazy if you want. There's a little bit of a part of me in the back of my mind that thinks if Pete Carroll does his thing the way that we're hoping, Chip Kelly's going to be the next head coach of the Raiders. Why not go out and get a young man that's about 26 years old that was recruited by Chip Kelly at UCLA that has gotten better and better and better, coming off a career-high 23 quarterback hits, coming off a career-high 4.5 sacks, in a season where the Dallas Cowboys were an absolute shit show. When you're as good and you get better and better, I like players that have the qualities that Osu has, being able to go out and get after the quarterback. You pair that with Rob Leonard and Patrick Graham, you're going to hear those names a lot, because I'm doing this show because I believe in our defensive staff, especially Rob Leonard in the trenches. So I don't mind spending a little bit of money. And I talked to Tom, our Cowboys guy, and I said 3 years, 63, 4 years, 85. And Tom was like, man, that's a little bit too much for me personally for Dallas. For me right now, for the Raiders, at a young age of 26, you could be looking at a defensive tackle that could be on your team legitimately if you do it right. 3 years, but then also an extension maybe until he's 32 years old. You pair him with somebody like Max Crosby. You pair him with somebody like Chip Kelly. Again, somebody's got a good relationship from their time at UCLA. I have him at number 4 because this is a long-term plan for the Raiders. Osa Odighizuwa. Before we get into our top 3, reminder, we're going to be making a lot of free agency videos now that the season is over. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure your notifications are turned on. When you turn on your notifications, I always love seeing the Noti Gang. Seriously, y'all are freaking legends, and those are the names that I remember all the time down in the comments. But also, when you click your notifications, click that bell, click all. That way, every time I drop a video, you don't miss one. If you want to see the perfect 5 free agents that the Raiders could sign for Patrick Graham, I talk about a whole bunch of different players in that video. If you want to see the top 5 players that I have for Chip Kelly in terms of free agency, you can also go check out that video as well. Both of those are going to be down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. Let's get to number 3 here, and my Raiders targets in the trenches, and this might shock a lot of people. Adam Butler at number 3. I have Adam Butler at number 3 because if it was up to me, I would sign Adam Butler at, let's just say, $5 million per year compared to Osu for 21 if I'm looking at it just based on a 1 year and 1 year rental only. Butler already has chemistry with Christian Wilkins, with Max Crosby. Crosby said it even in his podcast that he wants to be able to have players that he has continuity with. And Adam Butler last season was one of the most underappreciated players in the entire NFL. He might have been the most underappreciated player on the Raiders. He had a career-high 65 tackles, 16 starts last season, has played every game the past 2 years. In fact, he's only missed 2 games when you go back through his 7-year career. He also didn't, I will say this, he didn't play it all in 2022, okay? He ended up failing a physical in 2022 with Miami, never played that season, but didn't sign anywhere, didn't go anywhere, so that's just a whole year he did not play. My point is, when he's actually been on an NFL roster, he has only missed 2 games, okay? Which is very important. Still getting up there in age a little bit. It's going to be 30 years old, but the value that you're going to be able to get Adam Butler, like shit, I mean, look at this. PFF doesn't even have a value for him. Spotrac has him at 2 years, 5.7. If you're telling me right now I can go out and I can get Adam Butler at this price tag and put him on this defense for 2 years, that allows you to go and get so many other players from top to bottom. I'll be real, Butler's going to get more than this because I think PFF is a little bit too low on him, and this is going to be a secret that I want to keep. But Adam Butler is a hell of a player, and based on the value, based on the price tag, based on the already relationship with Max Crosby, Rob Leonard, Patrick Graham, Christian Wilkins, that's why I have Adam Butler at number 3. Let's go to number 2 here, Mekhi Becton. Whether you want to put him at offensive tackle, I would want to put him, though, at offensive guard. And I know that he was drafted to be a tackle coming out of Louisville, but he was always a player that I believe that you could put him at guard just because of how big of a human being he is. Battled a lot of injuries early on, kind of had a little bit of a Trent Brown issue where he was too fat, too big, and his knees couldn't handle it. Got into better shape. And 31 starts in the past 2 seasons with the Jets and with the Philadelphia Eagles. This is going to be another player that's probably going to get a little bit of a bump in pay because they just won the Super Bowl, and it happens every single year. But at 26 years old, if he can stay in good shape, he's going to be a good player. Again, when I talk about contract when it comes to Becton, he's going to get paid. 75.2 overall PFF grade last year. He's much better in the run game because he's a physical, dominating specimen. But when you are the size that Becton is, I am going to give him a contract that is more of an incentive-based deal. So when you see Spotrac projecting 4 years for 40, PFF 3 years for about 27, getting a player of Mekhi Becton's stature and just how much I want the Raiders to incorporate a physical running game, a physical offensive line like Becton is, and Becton can just set that tone. Because I'm telling you this right now, if Mekhi, and again, he's played mainly on the right side, if we could figure out a way to put him on the left, and if it was Colton Miller, Mekhi Becton, JPJ, I'm telling you this right now, JPJ and Mekhi Becton next to each other, if it's 4th down and 1, 3rd down and 1, I can tell you exactly where I'm going to run, and I don't know if you're going to be able to stop it. That's a great, great value for a big human being, but you got to put him on an incentive-based deal. Let's go to number 1, and guess what? It's another Philadelphia Eagle, and I'm going to go with Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat, to me, is the number 1 player in the trenches, in the free agency open market, that if I'm the Raiders and I got money to spend, I'm going to try to make it happen. 2.5 sacks in Super Bowl 59 against Kansas City. He's going to be 28 years old. And the mentality that Josh Sweat has, you pair that with somebody like Max Crosby, and look out. Because 28-year-old Sweat, 27-year-old Crosby, about 28, 29-year-old Christian Wilkins, there's your 2 edges and your defensive tackle. And then if maybe you can even get a cheaper player like Adam Butler, Mekhi Becton, those are all 3 players that you absolutely positively can put together. But averaged 673 snaps over the past 4 seasons, has bounced around from different team to team. Like Sweat was with Philadelphia this past year, got some good run also early on in his career, which some people said that he was going to be more of just a stand-up outside linebacker only. Sweat gives you a lot of versatility, and he's a player that I would love to see what somebody like Rob Leonard could do with him. Now, this is going to be the second time that he's hitting the open market in terms of free agency, but look at these values here, okay? $18.8 million on Spotrac or $18 million overall for PFF. I am more than okay giving Sweat a 3-year deal, tying him to somebody like Pete Carroll. And when you know that you're somebody that can get after the quarterback 8 double-digit sacks a season, you pair that with Max, you pair that with Wilkins, and that's going to be a huge, huge key to if the Raiders want to take down Kansas City and if the Raiders want to win in the trenches going forward. I also want to throw out some honorable mentions. Malcolm Koonce has got to make this list, and I said why he didn't make it earlier with Azeez. Kevin Zeitler is 34 years old. Still playing at a high level. Khalil Mack, I think some people are going to want me to put Mack in there, but Mack to me is going to make $23, $24 million per year. And just based on, again, us having so many other needs, and he's going to be 34 years old, if I'm going to spend that type of money, I want it to be on a player that I believe can at least give me 2 to 3 years down the road. Mack, I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. Calais Campbell's 38 years old, but according to PFF, was one of the best defensive tackles in the league last season, and he's still able to go out there and get it done. I'm telling you this right now. If I'm the Raiders and you're trying to figure out a 1-year stopgap defensive tackle because you want to spend in other areas, like you want to go out and you want to spend heavy on a Josh Sweat, you want to go out and spend heavy on even a Khalil Mack, right? You go out and get Calais Campbell on a cheap 1-year deal again. It's what he's been doing. He's going to keep on getting it done. Another player that I'll throw out there is Jaron Reed, 32 years old, got some experience with Pete Carroll, and because of that continuity is why he ended up making this list. So here are my top 10 Raiders free agent targets if they want to win in the trenches. And if it was up to me with $92.3 million in salary cap, I'm trying to go out and I'm trying to get 3 names. And quite frankly, with the amount of money that the Raiders have, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to go out and get a Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton, Adam Butler. And you know what? Let's have a little bit more fun. You can throw in any other name on this list because the Raiders can make it happen.